Judgment Day. Almost every major religion speaks of it. But what if everything you thought you knew depends entirely on which tradition you're listening to? Will every human being stand together before a final judgment? Will your actions determine another life instead? Will the world itself be destroyed and reborn? Or is there no single judgment day at all? For thousands of years, civilizations separated by vast deserts, towering mountains, and entire oceans arrived at remarkably different answers to the same haunting question: what happens when humanity is finally judged? Some envisioned heavenly courts where every deed is accounted for. Others imagined narrow bridges suspended over unimaginable depths. Some believed justice unfolds across countless lifetimes through karma, while others expected the entire universe to be renewed after a final cosmic battle. These ideas didn't appear overnight. They evolved across thousands of years of history, shaped civilizations, inspired sacred texts, and continue to influence billions of people today. In this documentary, we'll travel from the world's earliest written civilizations through Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Norse mythology to explore how each tradition understands humanity's final destiny. This isn't about deciding which belief is right or wrong. It's about understanding what each tradition teaches, how those ideas developed, and why the concept of Judgment Day has remained one of humanity's most enduring questions. If you enjoy documentaries that explore history and religion with curiosity and respect, consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this video. Now, to understand where these ideas came from, we have to travel back over 5,000 years to the birthplace of written history. Our journey begins in ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, often called the cradle of civilization. This was where some of humanity's first cities rose from the earth. It was where writing was invented. And for the first time, people began recording their beliefs on clay tablets, leaving behind a window into how they understood life and death. What they believed might surprise you. Unlike many later religions, the earliest Mesopotamian texts do not describe a future day when every person is gathered to face judgment. Instead, they speak of a shadowy realm beneath the earth, often called the House of Dust. According to works like the Epic of Gilgamesh, this was where all people went after death. Kings and servants, warriors and children, the righteous and the wicked, their earthly status no longer mattered. It wasn't a place of reward. It wasn't a place of final punishment. It was simply the destination of the dead. Families often buried loved ones with food, pottery, tools, and personal belongings, suggesting they believed the dead continued to exist in some form beyond the grave. But there was no universal resurrection, no final courtroom, no moment when every human life would be weighed together. For one of the world's earliest civilizations, death was not followed by a final judgment day. It marked the beginning of a different kind of existence. Yet as centuries passed, humanity's understanding of justice after death began to change. A new civilization would introduce an idea that would reshape religious history forever. Not everyone would share the same fate. Instead, every soul would be judged individually. Our next stop takes us to ancient Persia, where one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions emerged, Zoroastrianism. Founded on the teachings traditionally attributed to the prophet Zarathustra, this faith introduced a striking idea. Your choices in life matter, not just while you're alive, but after death. According to Zoroastrian belief, every person is judged based on their thoughts, words, and actions. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. These aren't simply moral ideals, they become the measure of a person's life. After death, each soul is believed to approach the Chinvat Bridge, the bridge that separates the world of the living from the world beyond. For the righteous, the bridge is described as wide and safe, leading toward a place of peace. For those whose lives were filled with evil, it becomes impossibly narrow. Unlike the beliefs we saw in ancient Mesopotamia, not everyone shares the same destiny. Here, every individual faces the consequences of the life they lived. But Zoroastrianism doesn't stop with personal judgment. It also looks far into the future. According to the tradition, history itself is moving toward a final climax, a time when evil will ultimately be defeated, the dead will be raised, and creation itself will be renewed. Rather than ending in permanent destruction, the world is restored. It's one of the earliest known religious visions of a future in which justice is completed on a cosmic scale. Whether these ideas later influenced other traditions or developed alongside them remains a subject of scholarly discussion. What is clear is that the concept of a future judgment had now become far more personal and far more universal. The next chapter of our journey takes us to ancient Israel, where ideas about death and judgment would continue to evolve in ways that still shape billions of lives today. As we arrive in ancient Israel, we find a belief that looks noticeably different from what we've seen so far. In the earliest books of the Hebrew Bible, the focus is not on a dramatic final judgment day. Instead, the dead are often described as entering Sheol, a quiet, shadowy realm where all people go after death, regardless of their status or achievements. At this stage, the emphasis of Israelite faith was less on what happened after death and more on living faithfully in the present, following God's covenant and seeking justice within this life. But history has a way of changing ideas. Over the centuries, the people of Israel experienced exile, foreign rule, persecution, and profound social upheaval. During the Second Temple period, Jewish thought began to develop new expectations about the future. Some Jewish writings started to speak of a coming day when God would intervene decisively in history. The dead would be raised. The righteous would be vindicated. Justice, which so often seemed absent in this world, would finally be fulfilled. One of the clearest examples appears in the book of Daniel, where many who sleep in the dust are described as awakening to different destinies. Not every Jewish group understood these ideas in the same way. For example, the Pharisees generally accepted beliefs in resurrection, while the Sadducees rejected them. Other communities held their own expectations about the end of the age. Even with these differences, the expectation of a future resurrection and divine judgment became deeply influential within many streams of Judaism. Those beliefs would also provide an important foundation for the religion that emerged in first-century Judea. Christianity would take these expectations and place them at the very center of its understanding of humanity's final destiny. The ideas that emerged within Judaism would profoundly shape the next major tradition in our journey. In the first century, Christianity grew from a Jewish context, carrying forward belief in one God, the authority of the Hebrew Scriptures, and the hope that history was moving toward a divinely appointed conclusion. At the center of Christian teaching is the belief that Jesus Christ will one day return. This event, often called the Second Coming, marks the beginning of the final judgment. According to the New Testament, the dead will be raised, and all humanity will stand before God. No one is overlooked. Every life, every action, and every choice is brought into the light. One of the most well-known descriptions appears in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus speaks of people being separated like a shepherd separates sheep from goats. The image symbolizes divine justice, with each person receiving the outcome of a life lived in response to God. The book of Revelation presents this future in vivid symbolic language. It describes the defeat of evil, the final judgment, and the creation of a new heaven and a new earth, where suffering, death, and mourning are brought to an end. While Christians have long agreed on the certainty of Christ's return and God's final judgment, they have not always agreed on every detail of how the events leading up to it will unfold. Different traditions interpret many of the prophetic passages in different ways, yet across these differences, the central hope remains remarkably consistent. History is not moving toward chaos without purpose. It is moving toward a moment when justice is fulfilled, evil is finally overcome, and creation is made new. As Christianity spread across continents, these beliefs influence countless cultures and societies. But our journey now takes us to another faith that also teaches a future day of resurrection and judgment, one that emerged centuries later in the Arabian Peninsula and shares many of these themes while presenting them through its own distinct revelation. In the early 7th century, a new religious tradition emerged in the Arabian Peninsula. Islam teaches that history is moving toward a definite conclusion, a day known in Arabic as Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Day of Resurrection. According to the Quran, this day will mark the end of the present world and the beginning of humanity's final accountability before God. Unlike a judgment reserved for a select group of people, Islamic teaching describes every human being, from the very first person to the last, as being gathered together. No one is forgotten, no one escapes. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that every action, whether public or private, is known to God. Nothing is too small to matter. Nothing is overlooked. Islamic tradition also speaks of each person's deeds being recorded throughout life. On the Day of Judgment, these records become a testimony to the choices each individual has made. The central message is clear. Every life carries responsibility. Every action has consequences. Among the most well-known images in Islamic tradition is the Sirat, a bridge associated with the events of the last day. Classical Islamic scholarship describes people crossing this bridge after judgment, with their passage reflecting God's justice and mercy. While the details vary among scholars and traditions, the bridge has become one of Islam's most recognizable symbols of humanity's final destiny. The Quran also describes two ultimate destinations. Jannah, often translated as paradise, is portrayed as a place of peace, fulfillment, and closeness to God. Jahannam, often translated as hell, represents separation from that reward and the consequences of rejecting God's guidance. For Muslims, however, the Day of Judgment is not simply about punishment. It is the complete fulfillment of divine justice. Every injustice that seemed unanswered, every act of kindness that went unnoticed, every sacrifice, every hidden deed, nothing is lost, nothing is forgotten. By the 7th century, the idea of a final judgment had become a central teaching, across the Abrahamic religions. Yet our journey now takes an unexpected turn. As we travel east into ancient India, we encounter traditions that ask a different question altogether. Instead of asking how humanity will be judged at the end of history, they ask whether history itself ever truly ends. As our journey reaches ancient India, the idea of a single universal judgment day begins to fade. In many Hindu traditions, time is not viewed as a straight line with a clear beginning and end. Instead, it is understood as a vast cycle, one in which creation, preservation, and renewal repeat across immense stretches of time. This different view of time leads to a different understanding of justice. Rather than one final judgment at the end of history, many Hindu philosophies teach that every action carries consequences through the law of karma. Karma is often misunderstood as fate. In reality, it refers to the principle that actions, whether good or bad, shape future experiences. Every choice leaves an imprint. Every action has consequences. But those consequences are not always experienced in a single lifetime. This brings us to another central belief shared by many Hindu traditions: samsara, the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. According to this worldview, death is not the final chapter. It is a transition. The soul continues its journey, taking on new forms as it moves through countless lifetimes. Many Hindu traditions also speak of Yama, the deity associated with death and justice. According to traditional belief, Yama judges the deeds of the departed, while Chitragupta is described as keeping a record of human actions. Yet this judgment is different from the final judgment found in the Abrahamic faiths. Its purpose is not to determine an eternal destination once and for all. Instead, it helps determine the conditions of one's next existence within the cycle of rebirth. For many Hindus, the ultimate goal is not simply to receive a favorable judgment, it is to break free from the cycle altogether. This liberation is known as moksha. Moksha represents freedom from samsara, the end of rebirth and union with ultimate reality, understood in different ways across the many schools of Hindu thought. Here, justice is not concentrated into a single day at the end of time. It unfolds continuously, lifetime after lifetime. As fascinating as this idea is, another tradition born in ancient India would soon offer an even more distinctive perspective. It would retain concepts like karma and rebirth, but remove the idea of an eternal soul altogether. That tradition is Buddhism. Around the 5th century BCE, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama began asking questions that have echoed through history ever since. Why do people suffer? Why do we grow old? Why do we die? And is there a way to break free from this endless cycle? According to Buddhist tradition, Siddhartha left behind a life of luxury in search of answers. After years of meditation and reflection, he attained enlightenment and became known as the Buddha, meaning the awakened one. While Buddhism shares ideas such as karma and rebirth with many Indian traditions, it offers a very different understanding of judgment. There is no single judgment day when all humanity stands before a supreme divine judge. Instead, every intentional action shapes future experience through the natural law of karma. In Buddhism, karma is not administered by a creator deity deciding each person's fate. Rather, it is understood as a moral principle woven into the fabric of existence itself. Actions have consequences. Compassion shapes the future. Hatred shapes the future. Greed, generosity, wisdom, and ignorance all leave their mark. The cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, known as samsara, continues for as long as ignorance and attachment remain. The ultimate goal is nirvana. Unlike heaven in many other religious traditions, nirvana is not generally understood as a place. It is the extinguishing of the causes of suffering and the liberation from the endless cycle of rebirth. In this worldview, the greatest victory is not surviving a final judgment, it is awakening before such a judgment is ever needed. Yet as different as Buddhism may seem, it shares something profound with every tradition we've explored. It asks the same timeless question: how should we live? Because how we live shapes what comes next. Our final historical stop takes us far from the deserts of the Middle East and the forests of India. Across frozen seas and towering fjords, the Norse people imagined a destiny unlike any we've seen before. A future where even the gods themselves could not escape the end. Our final stop takes us to the rugged landscapes of ancient Scandinavia. Here, among icy fjords, dense forests, and towering mountains, the Norse people told stories of a future unlike any we've encountered so far. They called it Ragnarök, often translated as the fate of the gods. Ragnarök is not simply the end of humanity. It is the end of an entire cosmic order. According to the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, a series of events will unfold before the final battle. A great winter, known as Fimbul Winter, blankets the world. Order begins to collapse. Conflict spreads across the land. Then comes a battle unlike any other. Gods, giants, and legendary creatures meet in a final confrontation. Even Odin, Thor, and Loki are destined to face their own end. Unlike many traditions we've explored, the Norse myths do not promise that the gods themselves escape destruction. They too are subject to fate. Yet Ragnarök is not the final chapter. After the destruction comes renewal. The old world gives way to a new one. The earth rises again from the sea, green and fertile. A small number of gods survive. 2 human beings, Leif and Leifthrassir, emerge to begin humanity anew. In many ways, this vision echoes a theme we've seen before: destruction, followed by restoration. But notice something remarkable. Across every civilization we've explored, the details are dramatically different. Ancient Mesopotamia imagined a quiet underworld shared by all. Zoroastrianism envisioned individual judgment and the renewal of creation. Many Jewish traditions looked forward to resurrection and divine justice. Christianity centered its hope on the final judgment and a new heaven and new earth. Islam taught a universal resurrection, accountability before God, and ultimate justice. Many Hindu traditions understood justice through karma and rebirth. Buddhism sought liberation from the cycle itself. The Norse imagined a final battle that even the gods could not avoid before the world began again. Different cultures, different histories, different answers. Yet beneath those differences lies something surprisingly familiar. Every civilization wrestled with the same question: is this life all there is? Or does justice continue beyond the grave? Even today, billions of people continue to search for answers. Some place their hope in a future resurrection, others in karma and rebirth, others in spiritual liberation. And many continue to explore these questions through philosophy, science, or personal reflection. The question has endured for thousands of years because every generation eventually faces the same reality. Life is temporary. What, if anything, comes next? Perhaps that is why the idea of Judgment Day, or whatever form it takes in different traditions, has never disappeared. It speaks to one of the deepest hopes of the human heart, that justice matters, that our choices matter, that our lives matter. History has given us many answers, religion has given us many answers, but the question remains as powerful today as it was when the first words were pressed into clay over 5,000 years ago. What happens when humanity is finally judged? Whatever your belief may be, one thing is certain: the search for that answer has shaped civilizations, inspired sacred texts, influenced billions of lives, and continues to define one of humanity's greatest conversations.